myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot see.
Good afternoon. Welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Ray. There's the Eddie Howe press conference review for the Carabao Cup semi-final first leg, which is away at Southampton tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, live on Sky Sports. Razor from BBC Radio Newcastle was first up. Asked him a question about injuries. Any injuries sustained from the previous game? Eddie replied no. No injuries to report. A couple of bumps and bruises as usual, but nothing too serious. Razor then said, look, you've been back a month. Give us an assessment of where you're at, how you think you're playing. And he said, look, Eddie Howe said, I think we've played well. Our general performances have been at a high level. But, you know, they haven't been perfect. And, you know, he then went on to say, look, when a performance is ever perfect? But he just said he can't fault the players for the effort that they've put in. And, you know, also said that, you know, defensively fantastic, could have done with a couple of more goals. Razor then moved on to the game, asking about the away leg being first. Is that beneficial to him? Is that the way he looks at it? And he said, look, from my point of view, just being in the semi-final is great for us. We know it's going to be two difficult games. Southampton beat Manchester City in the previous round. And from our perspective, we aren't underestimating them. He was asked about the manager at Southampton, obviously change of management since we last played Southampton. And he waxed lyrical a little bit about Nathan Jones, saying that he'd brought in subtle differences at Southampton, hadn't gone for a massive overhaul. And then he'd done a great job, of course, at his previous club at Luton. And that he was, you know, going through a process of implementing his ideas and having a degree of success. So, yeah, very appreciative of the job that he's done at Southampton and essentially said that they're not going to underestimate them. Razor then pointed to the fact this is only the club's second League Cup semi-final in its history. You know, is he happy with that? And he went, of course, we're happy, but, you know, delighted to be there, but that's not enough for us. You know, saying that you're in a semi-final or saying that you were in a semi-final if you get knocked out means absolutely nothing. And, you know, he understands that, the players understand that, and they're very focused and, you know, they want more. Razor pushed about the 3,000 fans who will be going down there. And, you know, again, Eddie Howe, he must get sick of probably answering this question, but, you know, it's the same answer every time. He went, look, the fans are always there. They've got unwavering support. They're fully committed. He says, I'm sure it'll be bouncing in the away end tomorrow night. And, you know, it's always uplifting for me, for the management team, for the players. And, you know, from his perspective, he can't praise the fans, you know, high enough for you know, back-to-back journeys really down south, Crystal Palace and then Southampton, but for the support that he seems to get home and away. He's you know, he never takes it for granted. Razor's last question was about Ryan Fraser, pushing him a little bit because he said, look, you know, you said in the past he hasn't been injured, he's training. What has he got to do to get back in the squad or get back into the team? He said, look, he's not injured, he is training, he's a valued member of the squad, and I would love to see him in a black and white shirt again. So I found that answer a little bit odd, if I'm being perfectly honest. But, you know, a lot of us probably feel that Ryan Fraser's probably played his last game. I'm sure Eddie knows that as well. Maybe he's just being protective of the player and not wanting to fuel any fire on any potential move talk. Graham Courtney, nice to hear him. Somebody who used to be part of the Metro Radio commentary team and, of course, worked at the football club when Keegan was manager on the PR side of things. He was working for TalkSport today. Just asking if there was any connection between him and the Southampton manager. And he just said, look, you know, with them both having managed on the South Coast. And he just said, no, look, we don't know each other, despite the obvious, you know, connection of both managing teams down there. He then asked him, you know, can you see similarities in what he's done at Southampton with what you've done here? He said, look, in terms of league positions, when he took over, maybe. He says, but I don't know the inner workings at Southampton, and, you know, I can't really comment any further. Graham also said that, you know, the fact that we're out of the FA Cup this weekend probably does us a favour as way as fixtures are concerned. Obviously, FA Cup tie would have been sandwiched in the middle of the two semi-final games. But again, Eddie Howe, he's answered this before, said, look, we don't want to think like that. It's, we wanted to progress in the FA Cup, and it's not a good thing that we're out of it, and we certainly aren't looking at that as a bonus that we're not playing this weekend. So he shut that one down quite quickly. Keith Downey from Sky was next. Basically just saying, one tie away from Wembley. How do you feel about that? And would you want to be in a good position for the second leg? And Eddie again just said, look, yes, the semi-final is a good spectacle, but we'll want more. He re-emphasised the fact that the players want more, the coach and staff want more, he wants more, the owners want more. They want to get to the final. But he said, yeah, of course, be good, for us to come home to St James's Park in a week's time and be in a good position for the second leg. Keith then mentioned that the support, has been huge in the cup during the cup run, and that he tried to say it was louder. I genuinely feel it's the complete opposite, Keith. Because of the fact that there's a lot of supporters who don't get a chance to come to the ground and maybe aren't up to date with the songs and stuff like that. And a lot of kids go, which is great, but I don't think the atmospheres are better in the cup. But Keith seems to think they are. And he was talking about, it being a special game and etc. And Eddie agreed. He just said, look, yeah, the support's been great across the board, across the games. This semi-final situation, they're going to be special games. It's difficult to categorise it. But he said we treat it like Premier League games. We want to keep winning and we want to keep the momentum going. Keith persisted on the whole two-leg situation in the semis, and says it's quite unusual, to have two legs in a cup semi-final. Does that alter your mindset? And he went, no. He says, I think that's something for the press to analyse. He says, for me, as the manager, the coach, he says, I just get to know the opposition. I like to look at what they're doing, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and it's just like preparing for a Premier League game. It's no different. And the fact that there's two legs, it's two games. It's just two games. That's the way he looks at it. Also asked about transfers by Keith. And does he find it difficult to shift between game preparation and transfers? And he went, look, I can shift my focus from one to another. He says, but my priority is game preparation, training. He says, and then when my day is finished, I can then maybe have a chat with people and look at the market, look at the players that maybe they might have been talking to, or who they're focusing on, who they're looking at. So that is part of his daily work, but it doesn't get in the way of his priority, which is game preparation and training. Asked about names and transfers, he just said, look, the club are trying on certain players, and that's where we are, but there's no names yet. Jeff from the BBC was up next, said 15 games unbeaten, Eddie, you must be very proud. And he agreed. He says, yeah, very proud for the staff, for the players, but he says, don't forget, it just takes one game and one defeat to lose that. And he says, to be honest, Saturday felt like a defeat, not because of the performance, but because we should have won that game. He says, but we're motivated as a group. We need to keep perspective, and we're going to continue in the same vein. He says, again, Jeff asked him about the semi-final, and would potentially we'll be looking at avoiding defeat in the first game. He went, no. Again, he shut him down straight away. We won't be approaching the game that way. He says, we're going to go there and try and win. Jeff then said that, you weren't born the last time Newcastle were in a semi-final in the League Cup. And Eddie again just said, well, yeah, you're right. He says, and it was a long time ago, but we don't tend to look back at, that history. We want to change that. We'll want to make our own history, in essence, is what he was saying. Lee Ryder from the Evening Chronicle was next, saying that, you presume you're going to play a full strength squad tomorrow. He said, well, look, I've got a strong squad to pick from. He says, but as always, we will make the decisions a bit nearer the time. Lee also said, look, Bruno played at Palace. You must have seen that as a hugely important game, especially with that, it looked as if he could have been out for a couple of weeks. And he said, look, the Premier League is hugely important, but so is this game. And he says, as for Bruno, he says, Bruno was 100% confident that he was fit to play, as were the medical staff, and I was happy to go with both player and medical staff's judgment, and he had a really good game. Lee asked him if Darlow was on his way to Hull, but he also covered his back with that question by saying, I would imagine that, with the semi-finals, you might not be, it might not be, happening quickly if that happens at all. He wouldn't comment on the link, but did say that there's nobody going out yet. And as always, I'll be assessing ins and outs on a daily basis with those who do the deals. And he asked about Anthony Gordon. Would he be a potential player coming to Newcastle? No comment was the answer from Eddie. George Colgan, one question, just said in the 90s, we had, some near misses, with FA Cup games and FA Cup finals and being in the chance to win the Premier League. With those, particular situations came weight of expectation. Do you feel that? And he just said, look, I feel leading the club is an important task. I don't take it lightly. He says, but I tend to approach things game by game. I approach each game in the same way. I'm very analytical with every game, and I don't get emotionally involved. And he says dealing it with things that way, meaning that maybe the weight of expectation doesn't weigh as heavy on him as it has on previous incumbents in the manager's chair. Ian Murtagh from the Daily Star, again, just said he must be incredibly proud of being a semi-final with the club. And he said, yeah, I am, but we want more. The players want more. The owners want more. And it's at the moment, yeah, being in a semi and being in the Champions League places is a healthy place to be. But, we aren't going to stop now. We're cracking on. And Ian, again, mentioned ceilings. He just said, look, you don't seem to have a ceiling. And he went, no, he says, there are no ceilings at Newcastle United. He says, if you put a line down in the sand, then you feel you can't cross it. He says, we haven't set any targets. We haven't set any ceilings at all at this club. So from our perspective, that's it. Craig Hope basically said, how have you done in the past in your semi-finals? And he laughed at him and said, that's a loaded question. He says, I bet you've been looking through your the history books to find out what I've done. But he, once he got the joking and laughing aside, he just said, look, for me, you're always looking to experience new things in your career. And he says, we're in a semi-final. I want to embrace it. I want to enjoy it. And I want the team to do the same, and the squad and the management team. He was also mentioning the fact that Eddie'd been to watch his little boy play the other day. It was in the newspapers, and he said, has he, has he learned any inspiration or ways to score goals? Which again, Craig being a bit cheeky, but Eddie Howe was laughing at that, and he just said, look, my little boy's team lost. And I had to console him in the car, but it was nice to get away from the day-to-day running of Newcastle for a couple of hours just to go and watch his son and give him some moral support. He pushed him again on his own career, and did he remember playing any semis as a child? And he said, well, look, I've got vague recollections. He says, but for me, it was always about playing football and not the games that I played in. He says, so, it wasn't significant if it was a quarter or a semi or a final. He says, I just loved playing football at a young age, and I can't particularly remember anything that I can recall. Scott was next up. He said, it probably hasn't escaped you, Eddie, that the semi-final second leg, falls at the end of the transfer window. Is that going to cause an issue for you? And he says, yeah. He says, I did chuckle when I saw that. He says, you'd want to avoid that kind of situation, really. But he said, look, my manager's role is reduced, in a lot of ways. He says, I often hear transfer talk second and third hand from people at the club. He says, and, rest assured, my focus will be on the second leg on the day of transfer deadline day. I'll leave that to other people. Meeting and greeting players, etc., can be done by others if need be. I can always meet them once the game has been played. Mark was next up, asking, whether the team would be focused tomorrow night, and, are there many in the squad who will realise that you've got to play the game rather than the occasion? And he said, of course. He says, there's a lot of experience in that dressing room. There's people who are internationals, people who are title winners, and he says all of that helps. He says, but the way that we push this across to other players is it's another big game, and that's the way we treat it. Martin next. Just said, does the semi-final games feel different to the league games? And he went, it's just the same for him. He says it's normal. He says I watch I watch and analyze the teams. Like he said before, I look for weaknesses and strengths, and and then I assess our players. And we obviously practice various set pieces, etc. And it's exactly the same. It's and the fact that it's against Southampton, it's a team they've already played before, so it's like a Premier League game to him. Martin asked if he felt pride at the semi-finals, and again, it's a similar question to some of the other journalists had asked. He said, "Yeah, I do, and I understand the importance of this game." Asked about cup competitions that he got to with Bournemouth, and he just recalled that he got to the quarters twice with Chelsea, with Bournemouth, but was drawn away twice to Chelsea, and that the draw hadn't been kind. So it's nice to go a step further. Jordan from Newcastle World said that again, he pushed on transfers. He says, at the last press conference, he said you were hoping to sign a player. Maybe with Chris Wood going out, he said any kind of player. And he says a football player. Good sense of humor. And is there a particular place you're looking to strengthen in the squad? And he said, well, yeah, things change day to day, as I keep saying. He says, but I'm not necessarily looking like for like up top, but I'm looking for a boost, up front with Chris Wood going out. Miles asked about ASM and Isaac. Said, how are they doing? Obviously, they both had layoffs, and are they getting close to firing on all cylinders? He said, again, as he mentioned at the last press conference, that Isaac hasn't had time to do much training, so but they've thrown him into the game situation, and he seems to be responding well. But that ASM is firing on all cylinders now. He's had more fitness work, he's at full strength, ASM. He was asked about the rumours as well about Shelvey going to Besiktas, and he said, I've got no idea where that's come from. Clearly doesn't want to lose Shelvey. Kieran said, will there be any big speeches from you, Eddie, with these occasions coming up the semi-finals? And he said, it's a gut instinct to him. He says, I use different methods at different times, depending on how I feel and how I think the players might need motivating or may not need motivating. He says, I don't necessarily do speeches before big games. He says, the staff and myself do talking and, do this talking in the build-up. He says, we like to keep the players' heads free on match day. He also Kieran asked if the players were grasping, the job at hand, and he went, look, they know the size of the club. They know what they want and desire. He says, and I don't have to remind them, how long it is since Newcastle won a trophy. He says, I just want them to go into this game and play in the normal way that they do. And he says, the rest should take care of itself. And last but by no means least, from Kieran, he was, again, just saying about the training ground, how's it taking shape? And he went, look, it is taking shape. He says, we feel a bit tight at the moment, though. He says, the players have got another couple of rooms that they can go into. He says, but, we can see the progress happening in front of our eyes, and we will, eventually feel the benefits when this is all finished. So that's it from Eddie's press conference. Just a shout out to Tom Dixon, Les, Doug, Billy. Hope you're well, lads. Please give the podcast a share. I'll be back at 6 o'clock with a fans forum. Might be nice to see a couple of you guys on if you fancy it. But I'll see you at 6 o'clock. Take care. A big thank you to all our sponsors, as always. Thanks to Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, and our website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Garden of Healing Dispensaries, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists. You can find them at thegohd.com. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria, and you can find them at mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to make an order, give them a call on 01768 210 102 or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to Blowhole Breweries, you can get a selection of beers, and the cans are in the design of the old Newcastle United entertainers strips. Blowholebrewery.co.uk. Thanks to Melly's Carpets and Beds, laying our reputation, one recommendation at a time. The best quality around at the cheapest prices. Melly's Beds and Carpets.co.uk. Email sales@mellysbedsandcarpets.co.uk or give Melly a call on 01670 632 216. And thanks to United Group Travel Limited, UK Coach Holidays in Morpeth, 01670 362 460, or mobile 07957 141 654. Graham, your driver, Beverly answering your calls and looking after you on your tour. Some great deals coming up there. Get yourself onto the website to check them out. Thanks also to Media Arts, who do all of our videos and help us with the technological side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the channel, then hit the subscribe button below. Hit the thumb up, which is the like button, which does us a big favour with the algorithm. And click share. Share it to Newcastle United Facebook groups or Twitter accounts or your own social media to help our community grow. And if you want to join the channel, hit the join button. And for as little as $1.99 a month, you can get some members-only videos and chances to win some fantastic prizes. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. Don't forget as well that we do events through NUFC Matters. And this one is the next event coming up, Friday the 24th of February, an evening with Newcastle United legend Steve Howe. Friday the 24th of February, Tyneside Irish Centre, and tickets are available at £50 from newcastlelegends.com. If you also go onto Voucher and search for the event, you can pick up a bargain on there. Don't forget, we also support the food bank on this channel. www.nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is where you can find the Matchday Bucket. You can make a virtual donation to the Matchday Bucket 365 days of the year to keep helping the food bank in Newcastle.